Hello again. Now, November is World Adoption Month. The United Nations estimates that close to 300,000 adoptions take place every year. From April 2010 to March 2020, over 15,000 adoptions were registered here in our country. Well, let's discuss the whole issue of adoption and the struggle that sometimes comes with it. I'm joined by Katinka Pieterse. She's chairperson of the National Adoption Coalition of South Africa. And I've got adoptive mother, Thabita Dolamo. Now, Thabita and Katinka, good afternoon. Welcome to today. And thank you very much for your time. First up, can I start with you, Katinka? How far is South Africa when it comes to adoption?
Good afternoon and happy to join. Yeah, this is not an easy question and I don't have an easy answer. I think, on the one hand, we have a very enabling legal and policy framework that actually encourages the uptake of adoptions. But yet, as you've mentioned, we don't see that reflected in practice. We still have quite low numbers. We're also facing multiple systemic challenges when it comes to adoption. For example, inconsistencies in terms of how we interpret the Act and how we implement the Act. We're also seeing inconsistencies between different provinces in how adoption services are prioritized and rolled out. And then we're also finding that, we're acknowledging that due to different cultural approaches, we do work differently when it comes to parties of the triad in adoption. Just as an example, the right of the birth mother to make decisions independent from extended family and things like that. So, we're facing different challenges. We're in a transitional phase when it comes to who's providing adoption services. So we've got our work cut out for us.
Yeah, Thabita, you are an adoptive mother. I mean, the legal provisions that Katinka is referring to, are they facilitating or are they stumbling blocks? Or put another way, what was the process like for you?
So initially I thought the process was taking long until I then started the journey legally so. It's very helpful both for myself and the baby that we welcomed at our home, and for the mother as well. We have learned along the journey that it is for all our protection, the baby, the birth mother, including myself.
Now, in black communities, sometimes when you say adoption, people say, no, they come up with all kinds of reasons and stuff. How was it for you? How did you get acceptability?
So I think because the family also traveled the journey of trying to have children biologically, they then got to understand that actually adopting is an option for us as my husband and I. And it was an easy conversation to have. And eventually, the baby now, well, not so much a baby anymore, but the child is so much joy to the entire family, and the family is bigger and better. And yes, the subject is still very much a strange conversation to have in the black communities. But for us, as the Dolamos, it was, we were being selfish about it and not wanting to care about what other people would think about us adopting.
Okay, we'll get some more nuances from you shortly, Thabita. Katinka, you write in an opinion piece, which I've read, to mark World Adoption Month, you write that adoption is still perceived as, you use words like problematic, difficult, complicated, and has a bad reputation in the public domain. What would be the underlying reasons for such?
I think there's multiple. I think one is that we lack a level of knowledge and insight and understanding into the real benefits and nature and purpose and importance of adoption. I do think there are issues around, as I've indicated, different cultural approaches to adoption. In some cultures, adoption is not viewed as something positive. The whole concept of permanent severance is quite threatening. I also believe that we've, unfortunately, although not many, we have seen examples both globally and in South Africa of not the best practice in adoptions. So I think there's multiple reasons why it's having a bad rep. I also just want to mention that I think the very complicated process that people have to follow in adoption, and the length of that process is also something that, although it's important to make sure that we do our services well, that it discourages a lot of people to actually consider adoptions.
Yeah, I mean, you said you were selfish, Thabita, you and the family. But I mean, because of what Katinka just said, was there at any stage where you thought, this is just taking too long, we're giving up?
No, not on my side. I was determined and I was very excited. And I think more so it was after I have accepted that we're not going to be able to do it biologically, and that we've tried all interventions and we're not going to try those interventions anymore. And thank God for the options of adoption that we then took that route.
Yeah. What should be the reasons for adoption, Katinka? I mean, in your experience and stuff, because some people give so many reasons. For example, I am poor, therefore I'm going to hand over my child to adoption. But that can't just be the reason.
No, definitely not. I think motivation in adoption is central to all conversations. Motivation of birth parents, why are they considering adoption? They come from different backgrounds. Obviously, most women that are considering adoption, expecting mothers or families that are affected by crisis pregnancies, are in desperate situations, and they would not approach us if they were in a comfortable situation. So it's often multiple challenges and adversities that they are facing. Poverty might be one of it, but it shouldn't be the main reason for making a child available for adoption. We are finding that expecting parents that are considering adoption have often been affected by sexual assault or rape or abuse in relationships. They often come from a history of adversity where they've faced multiple challenges and have been exposed to multiple traumas. They're often isolated. They often don't have significant support of others. So it's not the profile of the person that's comfortable and that's making a selfish decision because they don't want to parent. I think it's quite the opposite.
Yeah. I mean, Thabita, was it easy for you, and how old is your child now, and that psychological connection and the impact, because they're coming from somewhere, they're coming into their new home. Let's call it that.
Yes, it was. I was very anxious. It was completely new, but we had a lot of counseling throughout the process. In terms of how to integrate the child into the family. And fortunately for us, it's been such a wonderful journey. It's been so smooth.
How old was your baby? How old was your baby?
He was 4 months old. He is now 7 years old. It's been an amazing journey. And for me, it has always been about having a child who you would bring up just like any other child. So it really has been a beautiful journey for me personally.
And I've heard that a child's adoption story should be shared at some point in an age-appropriate manner. Are you ready for that? Has it happened? Or I don't know. When will it happen?
It started when he was 3 years old already. And for us, it was important to keep talking about it. It's not a once-off thing. And because he's going to grow up in different stages, we then need to have a conversation with him continuously in different stages. And of course, the tone will be different based on his age. So the term adoption is not a strange term to him. And we felt that he's going to go out into the world to a creche, for example, to a school, for example, and it cannot be a secret. And if he needs to hear it, he at least needs to hear it from me, because we have created a very safe platform for him to be himself and to embrace his past, his background, etc.
You seem to have an appropriate support system, your family, plus the counseling that you've mentioned. Katinka, adoption social workers, I mean, in our country, are they competent enough, and are they assisting adoptive mothers or adoptive parents properly?
As I've indicated, I think we're at an interesting transition because we have very experienced service providers that's been rendering the service for many years. And then we have emerging social workers in the employ of the Department of Social Development that will also be rolling out adoption services. So we're at a point in time where we have to work very hard to ensure that we keep the level of competency high. I think every time Thabita speaks, she refers to the level of service that was rendered. And I think that plays a massive role in not just the success of the adoption, but also the way that the adoptive parents are equipped to cope with the complexities that come with adoption and their ability to actually support the child post-adoption and through the different life cycles, as Thabita alluded to.
Yeah, what kind of questions should we be asking to support an adoptive mother like Thabita, so that we don't come across as being very weird or crazy or something?
Well, I think Thabita would be best suited to answer that. But I think what I've seen from adoptive parents, what I've learned is that on the one hand, they're just a normal family and they're just parenting and they've just become a family through adoption. But on the other hand, there's also this awareness and this insight and this sensitivity that there are different challenges and issues, and that they embrace that. And I think somebody like Thabita and her family that are quite publicly open to talk about the benefits and the reality of adoption, specifically from a cultural perspective, are quite courageous, because I think a lot of people are still fearful of the consequence of illegal adoption.
Thabita?
Oh, it could really be anything. But for me, what pops in my mind, you might ask the question later, but when you ask that question, what pops in my mind is the things not to say, to adoptive parents, as to, did you fail? That's why you go in the adoption route type of a thing. So readiness was also an important aspect for me. We went through different counseling. We went through counseling as a couple. I went through counseling as a mother and a wife. My husband did the same. And the siblings also had to be properly integrated into the whole journey. I was excited, but of course all of us were excited and had different fears, and which we needed to be open about them so that they can be resolved and attended to.
Yeah, I'm not going to wait until later. What is it that I should not do or not ask or not say when I talk to you about this particular issue? Let's go there.
You should never think that I have biologically failed to conceive, because that is a personal matter. I do talk about it, and I do embrace the fact that we couldn't. Whether it's failing or not, it's for God to answer that, I mean, the doctors, the specialists were there, but we just could not conceive. But it's not a matter to always hop on, because it was really not a nice journey. Having to go through different treatments, it was not nice, and become hopeful that, at the end of this treatment, chances are I'll be pregnant. And then I really don't want somebody else asking me 5 years later whether there was something wrong with my body or not. So those are the things that I don't think it's a fair conversation to have. Yeah.
Okay, Katinka, how do we ensure, I mean, are we doing the right things currently in terms of adoption to ensure the well-being of the child after they settle in their new home? What kind of support do you think should be given for a child who's now found a new home?
Important question. I think we do a lot to ensure that the parents are equipped and that the children that are placed are actual legal adoptable children. But I think we do lack the resources and even sometimes the capacity and the competence to render quality post-adoption services and support services. We all know that children that are placed for adoption, unlike with Thabita's case, currently are older. They can be close to a year or even older, children up to the age of 3-4 years. They've had exposure to multiple adversities. They often struggle to integrate into the family. There are issues or challenges sometimes around bonding and attachment. adoptive parents need guidance through the life cycles, how to tell this adoption story, how to encourage openness, how to have a heart of openness. So there's a lot that still needs to be done, but I think we're realizing through the lived experiences of people affected by adoption, sharing publicly now, that we need to sharpen up when it comes to the support post-placement, post-adoption, and not just for a year or two. There should be services that are accessible as adoptive families go through these transitions in the life cycles and experience different challenges.
Yeah, one would imagine that there will be different parenting strategies for different adoptions, like, for example, transracial adoptions. And what do you find, what are you seeing in our country about that, and what is your advice, Katinka?
Yeah, this is also quite a sensitive one. I think just first of all, in terms of our country's law and policy, we encourage same-race adoptions because we try and limit losses for adoptees, for children that are placed for adoption. So if you start losing your biological or your first family, you lose your culture, your language, things like that, the losses accumulate. So we try and strive towards doing same-race matching and placement. But obviously, race should never stand in the way of a child finding a forever family and having that belonging to a family. So with interrace adoptions, we really explore and emphasize the motivation of adoptive parents, that the motivation is a healthy one, that they understand the complexities, that they embrace the losses that will go with such an adoption, and that they also invest in terms of being racially sensitive and orientated for the child. So there's specific additional almost education, parent educational preparation that we try and provide in relation to interrace adoptions in South Africa.
Yeah, Thabita, ethics and professionalism. I mean, sometimes when you talk about adoptions, you hear about horror stories. Has your experience revealed or demonstrated in South Africa, at least in your case, that our practices, our adoption practices, are professional and ethical?
Absolutely. I feel so much safe. One of my fears was that one day I'll be working at a mall and his mother would recognize him and snatch him and I'll be traumatized. But it is safe. I feel comfortable. I feel supported, and the journey continues.
Yeah, the triad, Katinka, I mean, she just mentioned the fears and stuff like that, but there will be cases in adoptions where the biological mother would know about the adoptee, the adoptive mother, and how does that get managed? I mean, what are the learnings? What are you saying, Katinka?
With adoptions where there's a level of openness when it comes to communication and contact, we actually prepare all the parties beforehand. So there's this mutual agreement and consent. So the expectations are negotiated and contracted, and we enter in what the law refers to as a post-adoption agreement, which becomes part of the court order, which is an agreement that clearly stipulates the extent of the contact and the communication after the adoption, and accredited adoption social workers and CPOs facilitate that process. It doesn't matter how long that contract, the period that contracts speak to.
Okay, finally, Thabita, to you. I mean, every case is individual, every case is unique, every case is different. But if somebody was listening to this conversation we've been having and they've been wondering about adoption, what would be your top advice to them?
I would say it is the best decision that I have ever made. A child needed a home, and I needed an additional member to the family. And I came to terms with my infertility, and get informed, do your research, and make sure that all your fears are sort of talked to, so that you don't have anything, no stumbling blocks, but it is the best decision that I have ever made for myself and my family. So I would say go for it, and let's give a child a chance to have a normal life.
Yeah, and thanks for sharing your experience with us. Now, final word to you, Katinka, as Chairperson of the National Adoption Coalition of South Africa. It is Adoption Month in November, and you speak about awareness. What is the single biggest thing that we need to be aware of around adoption in our country today?
I think for me, the most important thing is that we can't do adoptions in a spirit of secrecy. So we need to raise awareness in communities about what the purpose of adoption and what are the benefits of adoption for children. And we need to be open about the fact that if we are continue to stereotype adoption and adoptive families and people impacted by adoption, we're actually becoming a bigger stumbling block in their process of integration, not just into their own family, but also as an adoptive family into our community. So I think we need to get to a point where we can openly discuss issues like infertility, issues of consent to adoption, if there were gender-based violence or rape or whatever, and also the openness of adoptive parents that with the child's best interest at heart, have the freedom to be able to be open and not to be scared that they will be judged and that they will be stereotyped.
Katinka Pieterse, Chairperson of the National Adoption Coalition of South Africa, and adoptive mother, Thabita Dolamo. Thank you very much for your time and sharing your experiences and insights around this issue of adoption, which at the best of times is a sensitive matter, a private matter, because November is World Adoption Month. That's why we had this discussion. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon.